The moment my sister looked me in the eye and said, "You think you're better than me," I knew our bond had shattered, and it was all because of a promotion I earned. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I had just been promoted at my marketing firm, a recognition I had worked years for, and I was excited to share the news with my family. I thought my sister Bryn would be happy for me. She's 2 years older than me, competitive, and always seemed insecure, living in my shadow in some ways I didn't realize until now. When I told her about the promotion, her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't congratulate me, didn't smile. Instead, she narrowed her eyes and said that line cold and cutting. I was stunned. I had imagined her cheering, asking for details, maybe even teasing me in a playful way. Instead, I felt a wall go up between us. At first, I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe she was tired or stressed. But over the next few days, it became clear her words weren't a slip, they were deliberate. Bryn started acting differently around me. At family dinners, she would make small comments, like implying my promotion was just luck or that I didn't really deserve it. At first, I laughed it off, hoping she was joking, but the tone in her voice said otherwise. I began noticing how she would compare herself to me constantly, subtly pointing out her own accomplishments in a way that made me feel I had to justify mine. I felt hurt, confused, and a little betrayed. I had always thought we were close, that we supported each other no matter what. The tension grew each week. I noticed Bryn talking behind my back to cousins and friends, twisting stories about work to make it sound like I was arrogant or overconfident. It stung because I knew the truth. I had earned this promotion through hard work and late nights, not by luck or favoritism. I realized she wasn't just jealous. She was trying to sabotage how others saw me. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, unsure if I should confront her or let it go. I decided to be patient. Instead of responding with anger, I started paying attention, quietly noticing every lie and manipulation. I made small changes, planting subtle ways to expose her behavior without creating a fight. When I saw her trying to take credit for my ideas or exaggerate my mistakes, I kept track of it. Eventually, it became clear that her jealousy and attempts to undermine me were obvious to others. Finally, when the right moment came, I didn't confront her angrily. I calmly shared the truth with those who mattered, letting them see her actions for what they were. It was painful, but I felt strong. Bryn's charm couldn't hide her envy anymore. I realized I didn't need her approval or to prove anything to her. I focused on my work, my growth, and my life, leaving her to face the consequences of her own choices. The betrayal hurt, but the experience taught me resilience, patience, and the importance of protecting myself from those who try to bring you down. I walked into the house still buzzing from the good news, my promotion feeling like a dream finally coming true. I could almost taste the celebration, imagining a quiet evening with Bryn, maybe a toast or even just her smiling at me with pride. But the moment I stepped inside, I sensed a chill I hadn't expected. Bryn was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, and before I could even get the words out about my day, she said, "So, you think you're better than me now?" Her tone cut sharper than any words I'd heard from her before. I froze, my excitement faltering into confusion. I had assumed she'd be happy for me, even proud. The thought that she could look at my achievement and twist it into judgment hurt more than I expected. I'm not trying to be better than you," I stammered, unsure how to respond to someone I trusted. The evening felt heavy. We tried to eat dinner, but every little thing became a spark. She made remarks about my choices at work, hinting that my promotion came with arrogance rather than merit. I countered, trying to explain how hard I'd worked, but each word seemed to land like oil on fire. Soon, every casual comment became loaded. A suggestion about cleaning the dishes turned into a debate about responsibility. A joke about a TV show became a test of who was smarter. I noticed how quickly the atmosphere shifted whenever I spoke about my accomplishment. The warmth I had felt coming home earlier evaporated, replaced by a tension I couldn't ignore. I realized this wasn't just about words. It was about her envy, simmering under the surface, now spilling into everything we shared. I tried to keep calm, to not let her bitterness ruin my night, but the sting of betrayal gnawed at me. By the end of the evening, I felt drained. Every small argument left a mark, and the laughter we once shared felt distant. I kept thinking back to the first moment she questioned me, and I realized our relationship had changed overnight. What should have been a celebration became a battlefield of silent resentment and subtle digs. I wondered if Bryn would ever be able to feel genuine happiness for me, or if this tension was the beginning of a long, quiet war between us. I began noticing small changes in Bryn's behavior that gnawed at me. At first, it was subtle. Little comments that seemed harmless but carried an edge I couldn't ignore. At family dinners, she would casually mention my promotion in a tone that made it sound insignificant, or worse, as if I had somehow tricked my way into it. "Tess got lucky again at work," she'd say to our aunts and uncles, her smile sweet but her words sharp. I could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes, and it made me flush with embarrassment. Every time I tried to share a story about work, she would interject, twisting details to make me seem boastful or naive. I felt a knot in my stomach as relatives nodded at her version, seemingly more convinced by her sly remarks than my excitement. I started to shrink back, speaking less, afraid that anything I said would be spun into fodder for her subtle attacks. The warmth I had once felt at family gatherings disappeared, replaced by an unspoken tension I couldn't ignore. Her jealousy was like a shadow hovering over every interaction. When I tried to brush it off, hoping it was just a momentary feeling, she found ways to bring it up again, masking her digs as jokes or playful teasing. But the sting was real, and I realized she wasn't joking at all. She wanted to make me doubt myself, to remind everyone that my success wasn't as deserved as it seemed. I began to feel isolated in my own family, as if I were standing on the outside while Bryn subtly rearranged the room to make me feel small. It was confusing and painful. I wanted to confront her, to demand why she felt the need to belittle me, but something in me hesitated. I could see her pride and envy intertwined, and the depth of it frightened me. This wasn't a simple disagreement or a fleeting irritation. It was a carefully built pattern of undermining that ran deeper than I had imagined. The hurt grew with every dinner, every gathering, every casual conversation that turned into a reminder of her quiet hostility. I realized then that our rivalry wasn't just occasional. It was embedded in her, shaping how she viewed me and our relationship. I felt a mixture of sorrow and determination. Sorrow for the sister I thought I knew, and determination to find a way to navigate the growing tension without letting her jealousy define who I was. I couldn't keep carrying the tension alone, so I decided to talk to Dane, my closest friend since college. Sitting across from him at our favorite cafe, I tried to explain what had been happening with Bryn, my voice low and hesitant. Dane listened carefully, his brow furrowing as I described the little jabs, the sly comments, and the way she seemed to turn every situation to her advantage. "She's manipulating how people see you," he said quietly, and I felt a shiver of both recognition and disbelief. I hadn't realized just how deliberate it had become. A few days later, I found out just how far Bryn was willing to go. A colleague from work, who I considered a friend, approached me with an awkward smile. "Bryn mentioned something you said about that meeting," he started, and I immediately sensed the trap. The conversation I had shared privately with a coworker had been taken out of context and presented as arrogance, as if I had been bragging or dismissing others' contributions. I felt my face heat up, a mix of embarrassment and fury rising inside me, but I forced a calm nod, refusing to show the storm swirling within. I walked away from that interaction feeling the weight of betrayal settle heavily on my shoulder. It was one thing for Bryn to make comments at home, but this crossed a line. She had reached outside our immediate circle, twisting facts to harm my reputation. I replayed the moment in my mind over and over, analyzing how carefully she had manipulated the situation. Every smile she had worn at family dinners, every sly remark, suddenly made sense. It was all part of a pattern, a calculated attempt to make me look foolish and arrogant. I didn't respond right away. My instincts told me that reacting in anger would only play into her hand. Instead, I bottled the humiliation, storing it alongside the hurt from previous encounters. I felt a quiet fury building, a determination to not let her behavior define me or dictate how others saw me. Sitting in silence later that night, I realized the betrayal cut deeper than I expected, not just because of the lies she spread, but because it came from someone I had once trusted implicitly. The sting lingered, a mixture of humiliation, disbelief, and simmering anger that refused to fade. I knew I had to be careful, to act with strategy rather than impulse, but a part of me also longed for some form of reckoning. For the first time, I understood that Bryn wasn't just jealous. She was actively trying to undermine me, and the impact of her manipulation could reach far beyond family dinners or casual. I refused to let things slide any longer. Instead of exploding, I mapped a quiet plan in my head, one built on timing and small, telling moves. I told myself the goal wasn't to humiliate, but to clarify truth so others could see what I already did. Her digs weren't harmless. I began by noting patterns, who she spoke to when she turned a friendly chat into a smear, the exact phrases she favored. That list became my compass. I started setting gentle traps that required no shouting. At family brunches, I asked Bryn to help with tiny tasks where responsibility would be obvious, arranging name cards, handing out dishes, keeping track of receipts for a shared bill. Each time she reached to claim credit or shifted blame, I kept a steady expression and logged the moment later in private notes. At work, I adjusted how I communicated, making sure contributions were copied to the right people and that conversations had follow-up emails. This wasn't petty vigilance. It was creating a paper trail that showed initiative and collaboration, not the selfishness she suggested. When she tried to rewrite a conversation or insinuate I'd spoken poorly about someone, I didn't confront her in public. Instead, I produced small corroborations, a calendar entry, a quick text from a colleague, a screenshot of a group message, things that quietly contradicted her version without drama. I arranged for neutral witnesses to be present at key moments. My manager in a review meeting, an aunt in the kitchen when credit for a family recipe was shared. Those witnesses weren't weapons. They were mirrors reflecting what actually happened. Over time, the discrepancies between her stories and real events accumulated into something unmistakable. I also leaned on calm persuasion. With people who seemed unsure, I asked simple questions that guided them to the truth. Do you remember who suggested this idea first? Or was that phrasing in the email? These prompts invited others to compare memory and fact without feeling accused. My intent was never to punish, but to restore balance by making information clear. That patience paid off. Casual conversations began to tilt toward clarity, and friends stopped assuming her version was the only one. At home, I kept distance in a way that signaled boundaries without theatrics. I stopped volunteering to cover for her or explain away her remarks. When she tried to draw me into petty quarrels, I answered with concise facts or walked away. Her attempts to rile me fizzled when they no longer produced the reaction she wanted. Slowly, her influence over family narratives weakened because I refused to supply fuel for her stories. I never celebrated these maneuvers out loud. The plan was deliberate but discreet, designed to expose patterns rather than attack a person. Watching her contradictions surface in everyday life felt strange, relief mixed with sorrow. I hadn't wanted this conflict, only honesty. In the end, the work I put into preserving my reputation and sanity wasn't revenge born of spite. It was a careful reclaiming of truth, done with restraint and resolve. I decided to set a small test to see how far Bryn's self-interest would go. I approached her with a family project, something seemingly harmless, organizing an old collection of family photos for an upcoming reunion. I framed it as a favor, a way for us to work together, and watched carefully how she responded. At first, she smiled, feigning excitement, and agreed to help. I kept my voice light, careful not to make it obvious that this was more than just a simple task. Almost immediately, Bryn began steering the work her way. She claimed she knew the best way to arrange the photos, subtly implying my suggestions were inadequate. She suggested labels and categories that were completely unnecessary, all while praising herself loudly for her ideas. I watched quietly, pretending to follow along, as she took control. She even called a cousin mid-task, boasting about how she was leading the project, giving the impression that I was just assisting. I felt a tight knot of frustration but forced myself to stay calm. Instead of confronting her, I started documenting everything discreetly. I took notes about the moments she tried to take credit for my contributions, the comments she made that twisted facts, and the ways she presented herself as the driving force behind what I had initiated. I saved photos of the work in progress, marking who had actually done each part. Every detail mattered. I knew this evidence could make her true behavior undeniable if I ever needed to show it. Her greed became more apparent as the hours passed. She corrected my notes, rearranged items I had carefully placed, and spoke over me whenever I tried to explain a simple idea. She seemed oblivious to the fact that her actions were being quietly recorded, giving me a clear view of her priorities, her image over honesty, her credit over teamwork. I realized she wasn't just competitive. She needed to feel superior at every opportunity. By the end of the day, the project was nearly finished, but Bryn had presented herself as the mastermind, leaving me in the background. I smiled politely, offered my input when asked, and kept all of my observations hidden. I knew that later, when I showed the evidence to family or friends, there would be no denying her behavior. What had seemed like a small test turned into a vivid picture of her self-centered nature. Sitting quietly afterward, I felt a mix of disappointment and resolve. Seeing her true colors unfold so clearly made the tension between us even sharper, but it also gave me a sense of clarity. I knew exactly what I was dealing with, and for the first time, I felt fully prepared to handle it strategically rather than emotionally. Bryn had revealed herself, and now I had the proof to match. Weeks turned into months, and I kept my phone on silent. I couldn't bring myself to delete her number, but I also couldn't read old messages without feeling a pull I wasn't ready for. The quiet was strange at first. I had spent years waiting for her calls, dreading them but still needing them. Now, the silence felt both peaceful and hollow. I threw myself into work, staying late, taking on new projects, anything to keep my mind busy. My boss noticed and started trusting me with more responsibility. When I got promoted, I wanted to share the news with someone, but the first person who came to mind was the one who had told me I wasn't her daughter anymore. I smiled through the congratulations from co-workers, then went home to an empty apartment. It wasn't loneliness exactly. It was something deeper, a quiet ache that sat in my chest. I started seeing a therapist after a coworker gently suggested it. The first few sessions were hard. I didn't know how to talk about what had happened without feeling guilty. My therapist asked me once, "When was the last time you did something just for you?" I didn't have an answer. That question stayed with me. I began small. I opened a savings account and decided it would be for me, not for emergencies at home, not for anyone else. I started putting away a little each month. Watching the balance grow gave me a feeling I hadn't known before, safety that didn't depend on anyone else. Outside of work, I learned how to enjoy quiet moments. I bought a small plant for my kitchen window, cooked meals I actually wanted to eat, and even took a weekend trip alone. It felt strange to spend money without guilt, but also freeing. Still, healing wasn't simple. Some nights I woke up thinking I heard my phone buzz. Holidays were the hardest. I'd walk through stores filled with families shopping together, hear songs that used to play in our house, and feel a sting deep in my chest. I'd imagine her sitting somewhere, maybe talking to relatives, pretending I didn't exist. That thought hurt more than the silence itself. But over time, the pain softened. I realized that missing someone didn't mean I had to go back to them. I could love her from a distance, even if she never loved me the way I needed. I learned how to build a life around peace instead of guilt. I still had moments when memories came rushing back. Her voice, the way she used to say I owed her everything. But those moments no longer ruled. The quiet that once felt unbearable became something steady, something I could live with. It wasn't the silence of loss anymore. It was the sound of my own strength. 2 years passed before I heard her name spoken to me again. It was a gray afternoon when my phone rang, and Tessa's name flashed on the screen. Her voice sounded uneasy, softer than usual. She told me my mother had been in and out of the hospital for weeks, that her health was getting worse. I didn't say anything at first. The words felt distant, like they belonged to someone else's story. Then Tessa said she'd been asking. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. 100 thoughts ran through my mind, the arguments, the insults, the silence that followed. I could almost hear her voice again, sharp and heavy with blame. Part of me wanted to hang up, to protect the peace I had finally found. But another part of me, the one that still remembered her laugh from years ago, couldn't ignore the call completely. Tessa didn't pressure me. She just said, "She's weaker now, Mary. Maybe she wants to make things right." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, thinking about everything that had happened since the last time we spoke. The money, the manipulation, the way she'd told me I wasn't her daughter. It all came back like a flood. I tried to convince myself not to go. I reminded myself how hard it had been to rebuild, how much it had taken to feel whole again. But something deeper kept tugging at me. It wasn't love, not anymore. It was something closer to unfinished business. A part of me that needed to face her, not for her sake, but for mine. I took a few days before deciding. I booked a ticket and packed light, just enough for a short trip. The night before I left, I sat on my bed, staring at the phone, half expecting her to call again. She didn't. I wondered if she even knew I was coming. When the plane landed, everything felt strange and familiar at once. The city I'd run from looked smaller. I drove past the streets I used to know, the ones where every memory felt like a weight on my chest. By the time I reached the hospital, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. Inside, the smell of antiseptic and the low hum of machines filled the air. Tessa met me in the hallway, eyes tired but kind. She said my mom was sleeping, but that she had been asking if I'd come. My stomach twisted. I didn't know what I would say to her, or if I wanted to say anything at all. Still, I walked toward her room. Each step felt like crossing a bridge between who I used to be and who I had become. I wasn't there out of duty or guilt. I was there to close the circle, to face the woman who had broken me, and finally decide for myself what forgiveness really meant. When I stepped into the hospital room, the air felt thick, heavy with the scent of medicine and something unspoken. She looked smaller than I remembered, her hair grayer, her face thinner. The woman lying there barely resembled the one who used to tower over me with words sharper than knives. For a moment, she didn't see me. Then her eyes opened, and when they met mine, I saw a flicker of surprise before her lips curved into a faint smile. "You came," she whispered, her voice rough but still carrying that same tone, the one that always assumed I'd return, no matter what she'd done. "I knew you'd forgive me." I stood at the foot of the bed, unsure if I should move closer. The years of distance, of silence, hung between us like a curtain that couldn't be lifted. Her smile wavered when I didn't respond right away. I took a breath, my chest tight but steady. "I did forgive you," I said quietly, "but not the way you think." She blinked, confusion flickering across her face. I continued, choosing each word carefully. I forgive you for what you did, but I'm not here to fix things. I'm not here to send money or take care of your guilt. I'm not your bank, and I'm not your target anymore. Her hand, weak but trembling, clutched at the blanket. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but instead her eyes narrowed, the old spark flashing through. "So you're really done?" she said, her tone suddenly cold again, just like before. I met her stare without looking away. "I've been done for years," I told her. "You just never noticed." The words hung in the air, and for once, she didn't have a response. The monitors beeped softly in the background, the sound almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat marking the end of something long overdue. I stood there, looking at the woman who had shaped so much of my pain, and realized I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't feel anything close to rage, just a deep, quiet release. She turned her face away, staring at the window, pretending not to care. I could tell pride still mattered more to her than truth. Maybe that would never change. And yet, even as she avoided my eyes, I felt lighter. It wasn't the reunion she might have imagined, but it was the closure I needed. I stayed for a few minutes longer, said a polite goodbye to Tessa in the hallway, and walked outside. The late afternoon sun hit my face, warm and steady. I took a deep breath, realizing I hadn't felt that kind of calm in years. In that moment, I finally understood. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past or giving someone another chance. It was about freeing yourself from their grip. And as I walked away from the hospital, I knew that chapter was closed for good. I stepped out of the hospital doors and felt the weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lift from my shoulders. For years, I had chased her approval, given her my time, my money, my energy, and now none of it mattered. Not because she rejected me, but because I had finally stopped letting her control me. That was my victory. The wind brushed against my face, and for the first time in decades, I felt steady, whole. I didn't need to check my phone for her calls, didn't need to wonder if she was pleased with me, didn't need to bend myself to fit her expectations. I had taken back the part of myself that she had always tried to own. That, more than anything, was the revenge I never realized I wanted. As I walked to my car, I thought about all the holidays I had spent feeling guilty, the nights I had cried alone because I wasn't enough. I realized I would never let someone else define my worth again. I could love people, yes, but I would never sacrifice my peace to make them feel safe or admired. That power, my own choice, was freedom. Later, sitting in a small cafe, I overheard a family laughing together. A pang of nostalgia hit me, but instead of longing, it brought clarity. Family is often glorified as unconditional, but the truth is, it should be reciprocal. It should nurture, not drain. I smiled quietly to myself and whispered, almost laughing, "Only when family acts like it." I thought about my past, all the mistakes, the guilt, the exhaustion. I didn't regret surviving, and I didn't resent myself. Every step, every tear, every difficult decision had led me to this moment. My story wasn't about abandonment or betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, defining my limits, and realizing that love and respect must be earned in both directions. By the time I got home, I felt different, lighter, almost unrecognizable to the old Marin who once bent to every demand. I opened my savings account and looked at the balance. This money was mine, a small symbol of control, of dignity, of life lived for myself. I smiled again. Her rejection no longer hurt me. Her manipulation no longer held sway. The real victory was not in making her feel anything, but in the quiet strength I carried within. That was the peace I had been seeking, the revenge that was truly mine. I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath, and realized that losing her as a mother hadn't been an ending. It had been a beginning, a chance to find myself, to honor my own worth, and to finally live untethered. I didn't need her approval, and I didn't need her love to survive. I was enough. I had become enough. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this emotional journey. Marin finally stood up for herself, faced her past, and reclaimed her life. She learned that real strength comes from setting boundaries, not from pleasing others. Betrayal hurt, but it led her to freedom and self-respect. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. See you next time.